This one's for you, Mike. Sup, kids? How are you today? I am a little bit hungover. Just a little bit, not hugely, just a little bit hungover. We went out for a friend's birthday last night, and I'm recovering now. And being old, or getting older as I do, that obviously becomes harder and harder to do. But you also have 101 coping mechanisms on how to get through that, and I'm in stage 3 where I've gotten dressed and I'm forcing myself to do some work. But regardless of that, you'll also notice that my voice is probably about 2 octaves lower than it usually is, and that will be because I've been out drinking and smoking and all the things which you shouldn't do if you're under the age of 18. If you're over the age of 18, do whatever you want. I don't control your life or anything. I'm just mumbling into the microphone right now. But what I want to talk about today. So I have been doing Inktober, as some of you know if you follow my Instagram. I have a premise for this year's Inktober. Last year I didn't really have a premise. When I did it last year, I essentially ignored, because you get prompts. I don't know so I'll explain Inktober just in case you're unaware. Inktober is, during Inktober you do a drawing every single day. And there are prompts which are given out by the Inktober website, Jake something or other, and you can follow these prompts as a way to kind of encourage you to draw every single day. And you basically just meant to create an illustration or drawing every single day. It's just one of those little encouragement projects, kind of like NaNoWriMo, where you write every single day, but with illustration. Now, last year I didn't follow any prompts. I just wanted to draw every single day, which is something I've done before. I did a 365 where I did a drawing every day for a year. So doing Inktober I find kind of easy, but I just wanted to get, like the creative juices flowing, and I can't really remember what I was doing last year. Was it last year? It must have been last year. Maybe last year or a year before. But I just did it as a case of wanting to get some illustration done. Now, this year I decided to follow the prompts. Now, I've been enjoying this year maybe slightly less than I did the year before. And there is a reason for that. Some of the drawings I've done I haven't really liked. I have a theme for this year. I decided, you can follow these prompts and you can draw whatever you want. Fair enough. But I wanted to give that extra layer of challenge to myself, which was essentially just, kind of pigeonholing, or like kind of capping off what I could actually do within that realm, as a challenge to myself, because, we'll get into that in a second. But so my theme is the Muppets. Now, I'm a big fan of the Muppets, a huge fan of the Muppets. I love puppetry and not children's TV, just, animation and stop motion and everything which is to do with that. The whole idea of making inanimate objects come to life and giving them personalities is something that hugely appeals to me. It's something which I've loved ever since I was a child. In fact, the video, which is Sledgehammer music video, which is stop motion claymation video, is one of the reasons I wanted to study film. And Wallace and Gromit is a big part of my kind of upbringing, and the Muppets were, and Sesame Street were as well. Even though I'm in the UK, I know they're a heavily US based thing, but they were a big part of things. So I decided that a lot of people do superheroes and fairy tales, and they reimagine them, and you see so much of that, and it kind of bores me, to be honest. I've seen so much of it now. I wanted to take a world or a universe which hadn't really been done to death. I mean, I know there's a lot of Muppet fan out there, and I know there's a lot of puppetry fan stuff, and that's great. But it's not every weekend you see Kermit just thrown on something. You'll see the occasional thing, browsing whatever DeviantArt or Imgur, but it's not been heavily exploited. So I decided to give myself that extra layer. So every single day I've got a Muppet, and then I take the prompt and the Muppet and I combine them into my illustration. Now, you may be wondering why I would take something which is already a bit of a challenge, which is doing an illustration every day, finding the time, motivation to do that, and then make it harder on myself. Essentially twofold. The first year I did it, I just did whatever I wanted. Second year, I'm using the prompts, which is a bit harder because you've got to come up with an idea based on the prompt. And then why would I add the Muppetry to it? Especially, I'm halfway through. By the time this goes up, it'll be probably day 27. So I'll be more than halfway through, and there's been days where I haven't enjoyed it. There's been illustrations which I've drawn, and I've thought, no, I don't really like that. But I've still put it out, and I've still shown it off to people, and still kind of gathered feedback and all that kind of stuff. Why would I continue it? And how do I find the motivation to keep doing that? And I think this is something which applies to practically everything I do, which is why for episode 100, this is episode 100, by the way, just a huge shout out to that. We didn't realize when I say we, there's me, this is me, there's no one else helps make this happen apart from the lovely people who come and talk to me. But we were at episode 100. I wanted to discuss essentially my motivations. Oh Jesus, my motivations in creation, essentially, and why I challenge myself, and why I do things I don't enjoy, and why I go out of my way to produce things, and essentially why when I hit hiccups and I make work which I don't like, why I'm not discouraged by it. Because I know this is a huge blockade for a lot of creative people, and not just creative people, just people in general. If you start something and it doesn't go quite how you want it to, or you get into something and it's going really well, and then you kind of create a couple of things and they're not quite right, or there's not something just a little bit off with them, that's a huge thing to overcome for a lot of people. And I'm one of those weird people who kind of is encouraged by it. Not that I'm, a glutton for punishment or anything, he says, slightly hungover. But, why this is a thing for me. Now, I'm a huge believer that if you become content with your world, your work, anything you're doing, essentially that's the end for you. That's the death of whatever you're doing. It can be applied to anything, essentially. If you're in your workplace and you find your job extremely easy and it lacks challenge, then you're going to get bored, and it'll begin to make you depressed, and it'll begin to just become something you essentially resent in the end. If you're doing illustration and you're happy with all your work, putting it out into the world, and you find that you can just keep producing the same Superman fan art for the rest of your entire life, and people will respond to that and share it, and you can make money from it. If you do that and that's all you do, and there's no challenge to it, you'll get bored, you'll get depressed, you'll no longer really want to. You'll get to a point where you don't really want to draw. My whole ethos with doing anything is that if there's no challenge, there's no real point. I wrote a book about it. Back to NaNoWriMo. I did NaNoWriMo 4 or 5 years ago. And the book I wrote was about a world without challenge. It was a world where everything was provided, and everyone was so depressed. Everyone was so unhappy with their realities that they ended up creating something over the top to compensate, to make them feel alive. And this is something, I'm not saying you need to really go out of your way and become sadistic with it or punish other people. You just have to introduce little bits of challenge, because this is the thing. If I don't have challenge, if I don't have anything kind of pushing against me, and this may be hugely overtelling about my personality, but if I don't have something to fight against, and then I get depressed. I start to lose an edge of what I want to do and what I want to be and how I want to behave. So I introduced struggle to it. This is why I gave up coffee for a month. Coffee's a huge part of my life, and I decided that I wanted to challenge myself. I'm currently, by the time this goes up, I'm doing a couch to 5K thing where I'm challenging myself to run 5K before I turn 30. I needed that extra edge. I was bored. I had nothing to do, so I introduced struggle into my life. Some would say this is hugely self-destructive. Some would say that this is probably not the best way to live your life. I'd agree in some capacity, because there is a level of you can go too far with this. But you got to find that balance. It takes some time to do that. So that's what I've been doing. This is what I've been doing with Inktober. I haven't been enjoying it at times. Some of the stuff I've done I really like. Some of it I don't. There's illustrations in there which I'll probably remove once I've finished Inktober, and there's other designs which I'll take on and do more with. But the fact that I've had ones which I didn't really enjoy has pushed me to try harder and take more time and thought into the other ones which I have finished and enjoyed. And that's been hugely beneficial for me. And it also, outside of Inktober, basically prompted me to pick up an old illustration and prove to myself that I could draw again. Because I was having a day where I was like, no, this just isn't working. This idea is not working, and I don't like the balance, but I don't actually have time to redraw this. I don't have time to go back and redo this and rethink this, so I'm just going to have to put this out as it is. So I picked up my iPad and was just like, right, we're going to prove to myself that I can draw, because I know I can draw. So I picked it up and I worked on this illustration, and it's coming along great. But it's one which I've completely ignored for months and months, because I just got bored with it. I didn't really, I couldn't convince myself to get along with it because I was doing other things. At the time I was drawing Potatropy and working on Potato Boy, which is still coming out, by the way. I'm so sorry that it's not out yet. Essentially, what's blocking me publishing a book is finding a publisher, but also finding, if I want to do it self-published, just finding someone to bind said book. But we'll get onto that another time. And this is something, it's just something, I don't know, it's hard to imbue to people that if you have no challenge, you'll be unhappy, because most of life is overcoming challenge, and most of life is just finding out how to get through life. I think most people would agree with that the whole part of life is figuring out how to get through life. So you do everything you can within your life to make life easier. That is why we have so much technology. That is why we have the systems and things in place. We discussed this when I was talking about self-travel and solo travel. You put systems in place to make things easier for people, to make everything more accessible, to make the whole world open like a big clam, and it's a buffet for the mind and the experience. And we're getting to these points where there is no struggle at a certain level. Obviously, there is different tiers, and there's still loads of struggles within the world, and I'm not in any way defaming that. But we're at this stage of kind of complete automation. The whole self-driving car thing. If there's no challenge to driving, will you travel? Will you go do things? And that's the goal of life. So that's how you're ingrained. That's how you're programmed to work from birth, is do things. And as human beings, we love to make things easier, and we're logistic, and we problem solve whether we want to or not. We find the easiest route and we do that route, and then we make it more efficient and program blah 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 blah. And then of course the balance of that is that we don't consider the ramifications of said automation or environmental impact, and thus we are in the 20th century doing what we do. So when it comes to doing things and things you actually want to do, when you encounter something which is tough and a struggle, your brain kicks in and goes, oh, well, hang on a minute. This isn't a necessity for your life. You want to learn how to ride a bike or paint or play a musical instrument. And your brain goes, oh, well, this is interesting. You're trying to do something which isn't necessary for your survival. It's a struggle. It's also, it might be slightly harder than we initially intended to think it would be. What can we do in this situation? And of course, the easiest and most logical version of that situation is to just stop, to not do it. It's not part of the hunter-gatherer ethos to be able to play an electric guitar. So therefore, we can just stop. We'll just not do that. And we'll carry on. And to me, that works out as insanity. because you face this challenge and you're feeling bad because it's not going how it's going, but you're willing to accept and go into something which is slightly more Novocaine, which is just back to what you were doing in the first place. That to me is more depressing. That to me is more depressing than failing at something. If you're gonna run 5K, if you're gonna fall over and just prevent yourself from doing anything, or struggle. I mean, I've been dying on these runs. It's not fun. It's no longer fun. I'm at a point where in the training where I'm struggling every single time I go out. But it's more depressing to me to think, well, yeah, I am struggling doing all this, but also I could have done a month where I just didn't do any of this. And I kept in the situation I was, and yeah, that was alright, but it wasn't great. Yeah. I feel like maybe that's the human vibe. It's like, yeah, it's alright, but it's not great. Make it great, go out and do the things. It's so hard to, and I completely understand, by the way, that it is extremely hard to motivate. But my whole view of how you live life, and at least how I live life, is that you introduce these challenges, even if it's just small challenges, into your own life in order to help you progress, and that is important. So if you're trying something, let's say you have a project, or you have something you want to learn and you want to do it, or even if it's just something you do every single day, if you're great at something and you're trying something, twist it slightly, just edge it, just take it, and if it's a little clock, you twist it sideways, put a picture frame slightly askew, and get that going, just to challenge yourself, troll yourself, essentially, is what I'm saying. If we're boiling it down to things, troll yourself, make your life slightly harder, and you will feel more fulfilled by your life. I don't know if that's a bad way to live, but that's essentially how I live. That's essentially how I approach all projects I'm doing. Is just you find something you do, and then if you become good at it, or you get to a point where you're very satisfied with what you're doing, you need to push your little edge. You find what you don't like, what you struggle with, and you push that a little bit more. This was a whole thing. This was one of the reasons I did 365 was. I knew I could draw to an extent. I knew there was things which I didn't know how to draw. So when I did it, I took suggestions from the public, and I ran with it, and decided that in order to challenge myself, I would do that by allowing other people to control the content of what I was drawing. And that pushed me, that because you're in debt to the public, and you're trying to fulfill your own ideal goal, and you can cop out, any single day you can just ignore that and do whatever you want to do. But the feeling you get at the end of actually doing it, whether you like the drawing or not, and you find you improve. I mean, that's how I end off in myself. I don't know, and there's a level of self-abuse to everything. I think that's a way of, or at least how I see life. There's a level of self-abuse to everything, but the benefits of twinging yourself, so to speak. I've used so many different adjectives to talk about this. Maybe are they adjectives? I don't know. I'm not an English student. The level of doing that to yourself it needs to be rewarding in a way. There's bits where this could turn into self-hatred and punishing yourself and all those kinds of things. And I do have stages where it can get to that, and I'm very aware of that. So I do stop myself. But to live any other way, to me, is madness. To live in a situation where I'm just completely comfortable, completely happy, would not make me happy. To be content is the enemy of creation. To be content is the enemy of invention. Those are two things which I really take to heart and really try to imbue in every single thing I've done. We're at 100 podcasts right now. Episode 100. I've been doing this for 3 years now. It's not the easiest thing to do at times. Finding guests can be a struggle. Finding topics to discuss can be a struggle. But it's something which I enjoy doing, and the challenge of doing it keeps me going, and it has rewards which I've never even considered, and it's had moments where making it slightly more challenging for myself has just paid off in such a way that I couldn't really even imagine, whether it just be kind of emotionally or even monetarily, so that's why I keep doing it, and I find that fun to have that challenge. This is something I say about a lot of the projects I do. As soon as it stops being fun is when I will stop. As soon as something gets to a point where it's no longer fun and it's too challenged, and I'm struggling, or I just don't enjoy it because, again, it might have become too easy, that's when I'll stop. That's when I'll no longer want to do something. This is just a message in a way. This is my motivational speech. This is the one. This is how we're going into episode 101, is me sitting here and saying, look, these are all the things I do. This is how I communicate. I had an episode a while back with Zach Jones, and he was trying to figure out how I do what I do, and essentially this boils it down. All of this boils it down. Something small project within October has revealed to everybody that the way I do things is by challenging myself in small increments and pushing that button in order to keep going. Oh, the video just filled up. My card got full on my camera. Fantastic. This is the way to end episode 100, is with a camera fail. But I will keep going either way. Apologies if you're watching on YouTube, but this is it. This is the motivational moment. This is how we're bringing it about, and this is what I want to suggest to all of you who may listen or participate or come on the show or just even stumble across this podcast, is that the rewards of challenging yourself are much greater. And if you have a life where you do not feel challenged within work or within your home life, or with anything you do, and you're feeling depressed and you're feeling anxious about all of that and you don't feel fulfilled, just try and add a little bit of challenge. Take something you know how to do and tweak it slightly. You're great at baking cakes. Fantastic. Bake something you've never baked before. Bake something you think is difficult. You're great at drawing. Cool. Draw something you've never tried to draw before. Do that little extra. And if it sucks, fantastic. Show it to the world. Show them what went wrong. And you might get feedback on how to make it better. And also, you're going to learn from all those mistakes and do better anyway. Just add that little bit of challenge. Challenge is, if contentment is the enemy of creativity, challenge is the friend. I think that's a good point to end on. Thank you for listening. This has been episode 100. I'm still, after 3 years, yelling at concrete. And we'll see how far we can get with this before it becomes boring. I'll talk to you guys later.